They had conquered 17 star systems in 30 years. Their warriors stood 8 feet tall with hard shells covering their bodies like armor. Their weapons could melt steel. Their ships darkened the skies of every world they invaded. No species had ever defeated them in battle. When their scout ships first found Earth, the commanders laughed. Humans were small, soft creatures with no natural weapons. They had no claws, no fangs, no armor. They bled easily and died quickly. The High Command marked humanity as a minor threat and sent a standard invasion fleet to claim their worlds. The fleet arrived at Station, a mining outpost on the edge of human space. It was a small station with gray metal walls and narrow corridors, nothing special. They expected to take it within hours. Lieutenant Park watched the enemy ships approach on his monitor. He was 32 years old with short black hair and tired eyes. He had served in the Republic of Korea Space Marine Corps for 10 years, but he had never seen real combat. None of them had. Humanity had been at peace for generations. Now 200 Marines stood between the and 12,000 civilian workers. "Sir, they are launching," said Sergeant Borahan. She was young, maybe 25, with her hair pulled back tight. Her hands were steady on her rifle. Counted thee on his screen. 20 of them, each carrying at least 50 warriors. 1,000 enemy soldiers against his 200 Marines. "Get the civilians to the evacuation shuttles," he ordered. "We hold the main corridors until they are away." "Sir, we cannot win this fight." "I know," loaded his rifle. "We just need to slow them down." They landed in the station's cargo bay. They moved with perfect coordination, their tall bodies filling the wide corridors. Their commander, a warrior named, expected the humans to retreat. Every other species had run when they saw soldiers. The humans did not run. Had positioned his Marines in the maintenance tunnels that ran through the station walls. These tunnels were too small for them to enter. When the enemy advanced down the main corridor, human soldiers appeared from vents and hatches on all sides. The first volley killed 30 warriors before they could react. Roared orders in his harsh language. His soldiers turned to face the attack, but the humans had already disappeared back into the tunnels. They emerged again from different openings, fired another volley, and vanished once more. "They fight like insects," growled. "Burn them out." They used their thermal weapons to melt sections of the wall. The heat was terrible. 3 Marines died in the first blast, their bodies turned to ash in seconds. But the humans kept fighting. Borahan led a team through the lower tunnels. They came up behind a squad and attacked with grenades and close-range fire. She lost 4 soldiers in the fight, but they killed 20 enemies. Private was just 19 years old. He had joined the Marines to pay for university. Now he stood alone in a narrow passage, his ammunition nearly gone, facing 3 warriors. He killed 2 of them before the third crushed his rifle, pulled out his combat knife and drove it into the gap between the aliens' armor plates. They found him later, still holding the knife. The dead warrior collapsed on top of him. The battle lasted 19 hours. Moved through the station like a ghost, appearing wherever the fighting was worst. He lost count of how many times he fired his weapon. He lost count of how many friends died beside him. But every hour they held was another hour for the evacuation shuttles to escape. Could not understand what was happening. His warriors were stronger, better armed, and more numerous. By every calculation, the humans should have surrendered after the first hour. Instead, they fought harder as their numbers decreased. "They do not follow logic," reported to his ship. "They continue fighting even when wounded. They continue fighting even when alone. They do not surrender." "All species surrender eventually," his superior replied. "Increase pressure." Sent more warriors into the station. The humans killed them in the tunnels, in the corridors, in the cargo bays. They set traps using mining equipment. They collapsed ceiling sections on enemy squads. They fought with rifles, pistols, knives, and bare hands. When the human reinforcement fleet finally arrived, they found Station in ruins. Fires burned in every section. Bodies littered the corridors. But the central hub was still in human hands. Stood at the main door with 17 surviving Marines. Behind him, the last evacuation shuttle was loading its final passengers. Before him lay the bodies of 400 warriors. The reinforcement commander stared at the scene in disbelief. "Lieutenant, how is this possible?" Did not answer. He could barely stand. Blood ran down his face from a wound on his forehead. 3 of his fingers were broken. He had not slept in 30 hours. But they had held. The fleet retreated when human warships arrived. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had lost more soldiers in one engagement than in their entire previous campaign. Admiral reviewed the combat footage in his dark command chamber. He watched humans die and continue fighting. He watched them sacrifice themselves to save their companions. He watched them refuse to surrender even when surrounded. These humans, his tactical officer observed, they do not behave like a conquered species. Their heart rates increase during combat, but this makes them fight harder, not weaker. A flaw in their biology, replied. Adrenaline, it clouds their judgment. They will learn fear eventually. He was already planning a larger invasion, a proper fleet with enough warriors to crush any resistance. The humans had surprised them once. It would not happen again. But somewhere deep in his mind, a small doubt had formed. He had seen the look in that human lieutenant's eyes through the security footage. It was not the look of a creature fighting because it had no choice. It was the look of a creature that had chosen to fight and would never stop choosing. Dismiss the thought. They had conquered 17 star systems. These soft, small humans were just another obstacle to overcome. He would learn how wrong he was. 3 months after station, they returned with a proper invasion force. 20,000 warriors filled there. Massive bombardment platforms orbited above, ready to burn cities from space. This time there would be no mistakes. Their target was new, humanity's largest colony world. 12 million people lived there in cities surrounded by green farmland and blue oceans. It was a peaceful world. Most of its people had never seen a weapon fired in anger. Captain stood on the walls of Firebase Echo when the first explosions lit up the sky. She was 38 years old, a career soldier with gray streaks in her black hair and a calm voice that never wavered. She had trained for war her entire life but had never expected to see one. All units prepare for ground assault, she said into her radio. They are coming. The bombardment was terrible. Bright beams of energy fell from orbit like rain, each one destroying everything within 100 meters. The planetary defense grid tried to fight back, but it was designed to stop pirates, not invasion fleets. Within the first hour, 60% of their defensive weapons were gone. Then the came. Firebase Echo was a small military base overlooking Highway 7, the main road connecting the coastal cities to the capital. If they controlled this highway, they could move their forces anywhere on the continent. Had 300 soldiers under her command. She watched the enemy land and counted the warriors pouring out. 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. Ma'am, we are outnumbered 20-1, said Lieutenant Ryu, her second in command. He was a big man with a kind face, the type of soldier who remembered everyone's birthday. Then each of us needs to kill 20 of them, replied. The first assault came at dawn. They advanced in perfect formation, their tall shapes dark against the rising sun. They expected the humans to break and run. Had positioned her soldiers in bunkers and trenches dug into the hillside. They waited until the enemy was close, then opened fire with everything they had. Rifles, machine guns, rockets, grenades. The noise was deafening. The first wave fell. The second wave climbed over their bodies and kept coming. For 3 days, soldiers held Firebase Echo. They fought during the day and repaired their defenses at night. They slept in shifts, sometimes only an hour at a time. They ate cold rations while firing their weapons. They buried their dead between assaults. Private was a medic, just 21 years old with gentle hands better suited for healing than fighting. She crawled through enemy fire to drag wounded soldiers to safety. She performed surgery in a basement with no electricity, using a flashlight held between her teeth. She saved 47 lives before a piece of shrapnel took her own. Corporal was an engineer who had never held a rifle before the invasion. He learned quickly. When they broke through the eastern wall, he held them back alone for 15 minutes while his unit retreated. They found his body surrounded by 11 dead enemies. On the third day, received word that the colonial militia was collapsing across the planet. They had pushed humanity's defenders into a shrinking circle around the capital city. Evacuation ships were loading civilians as fast as possible, but they needed more time. Command gave new orders, hold Highway 7 at all costs. At all costs, she repeated quietly. She looked at her soldiers, their faces dirty and exhausted, their eyes still burning with determination. She had started with 300, now she had 140. "We hold," she told them. "For everyone trying to escape, for everyone counting on us, we hold." On the fourth day, a commander approached under a white flag. He was taller than the others, with golden markings on his armor that showed his rank. He carried a translation device that turned his harsh language into human words. "Your resistance is brave but pointless," he said. "Surrender now and we will allow your civilians to evacuate safely. Continue fighting and we will destroy this city from orbit." Walked out to meet him. She was small compared to the alien, barely reaching his chest. But she stood straight and met his eyes without fear. "You have seen what our regular soldiers can do," she said. "You have not seen what happens when you threaten our families." She raised her pistol and shot the translation device out of his hand. The machine exploded in a shower of sparks. "Get off my planet." The commander stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked back to his lines. The bombardment resumed within the hour. Firebase Echo was reduced to rubble, but it bought 12 hours, enough time for the last evacuation transports to reach safe distance. When the ships were away, gathered her surviving soldiers, 31 out of 140. They were wounded, exhausted, and out of ammunition. "Ma'am, what do we do now?" asked Lieutenant Ryu. His left arm was in a sling, broken by a piece of falling concrete. Looked toward the mountains that rose behind the firebase. Dense forests covered their slopes, hiding caves and valleys where a small force could disappear. "We go to the mountains," she said. "We find other survivors, and we make them pay for every inch of our world." The declared victory, and occupied New. They raised their flags over the capital city and announced to the galaxy that another world had fallen to the Dominion. They did not know that 31 soldiers were watching from the mountains. They did not know that across the planet, thousands of survivors were making the same choice had made. They did not know that the real war was just beginning. The occupation of New was supposed to be simple. They had conquered the cities, destroyed the military bases, and raised their flags over the capital. By every measure, the war was over. But their soldiers kept dying. Supply convoys vanished on mountain roads. Guards were found dead at their posts with no sign of struggle. Fuel depots exploded in the middle of the night. Communication towers fell silent without warning. The commanders called these events accidents at first. Then they called them coincidences. Then they called them sabotage by local criminals. They did not understand what they were truly facing. Master Sergeant Lee had served 23 years in the Republic of Korea Army Special Warfare Command before the invasion. He was 51 years old with gray hair and a face weathered by decades of hard living. He spoke softly and rarely smiled. His eyes had seen things that would break most men. When New fell, gathered survivors from his unit. 8 operators were all that remained of the 707th Special Mission Group. 8 soldiers against an occupation army of 15,000. "We cannot win a direct fight," told his team in a cave deep in the mountains. "So we will not fight directly, we will become ghosts." They called themselves after the goblins of old Korean stories. Tricksters who appeared from nowhere, caused chaos, and vanished without trace. The name spread through whispered conversations among the resistance, becoming a legend before the month was over. Sergeant was the team's infiltration specialist. She was 34 years old, thin and quiet, with a talent for becoming invisible. She spent weeks studying learning their patrol patterns, their shift changes, their blind spots. The aliens were creatures of strict routine. They believed in order and efficiency above all else. This made them predictable. Exploited every weakness. She slipped through gaps in sensor networks that should not have existed. She walked past guards who never saw her. Within 6 weeks, she had mapped every major installation on the continent. "They think like machines," she reported to. "They expect everyone else to think like machines too. They do not understand chaos." Corporal was the team's explosives expert. He was 28 years old with clever hands and a crooked smile. Before the invasion, he had been studying to become a teacher. Now he built bombs from farming chemicals and mining equipment. His devices were designed for maximum psychological impact. They did not just destroy targets, they destroyed the enemy's sense of safety. A fuel depot would explode at exactly midnight, the same time every night for a week. Then it would stop. Then it would start again. They never knew when the next attack would come. They stopped sleeping. They started making mistakes. Fear is a weapon, explained. Make them afraid of everything and they become afraid of nothing specific. That is when they are most vulnerable. Private O served as the team's medic and communications specialist. She was 26 years old, the youngest member of the group, with steady hands and a warm voice that calmed even the most frightened survivors. She established contact with resistance cells across the planet, farmers who hid weapons in their barns, factory workers who sabotaged equipment, children who carried messages through streets the thought they controlled. The resistance network grew slowly, carefully, one trusted person at a time. By the third month of occupation was coordinating attacks across 3 continents. They see only what is in front of them, she told the others. They do not see the connections between things. They do not see the web we are building around them. They struck without warning and without pattern. One night they destroyed a weapons depot. The next week they assassinated a garrison commander in his quarters. The week after that, nothing happened at all. They responded with overwhelming force. They deployed hunting packs with special sensors. They launched surveillance drones that filled the skies like mechanical insects. They brought in interrogation specialists who tortured prisoners for information. None of it worked. The hunting packs found empty trails that led in circles. The drones watched forests where nothing moved. The interrogators learned nothing useful because the resistance cells were designed so that each member knew only their small piece of the larger plan. Admiral reviewed reports from New with growing frustration. His occupation force outnumbered the known resistance fighters by 1,000 to 1. They had superior weapons, superior technology, superior everything. And yet they were losing. These are not regular soldiers, an intelligence officer admitted during a briefing. They do not fight for territory or resources. They do not follow any tactical doctrine we recognize. They appear, they kill, they disappear. We cannot predict them because they do not behave in predictable ways. Then what are they? Demanded. The officer hesitated. Our analysts have found a human term that seems to apply. They call these units special forces. Soldiers who are trained to operate independently behind enemy lines with minimal support. Soldiers who specialize in unconventional warfare. Stared at the casualty reports on his screen. 300 dead in the past month alone. Not from major battles, but from 100 small attacks that seemed random, but somehow always hit critical targets. How many of these special forces are on the planet? Unknown, Admiral. Estimates range from a handful to several hundred. We cannot confirm anything. In the mountains of Nu, Lee watched the stars through the mouth of his cave. 8 soldiers against an empire, it seemed impossible. But he had seen impossible things before. He had seen farmers become warriors and children become spies. He had seen fear spread through an army that should have been unbreakable. We are just the beginning, he said quietly. Wait until they meet the others. Somewhere out there, beyond the sensor networks, beyond their patrol routes, beyond their understanding, the real hunters were preparing to move. 6 months into the occupation, they finally captured one of the ghosts. Warrant Officer was 43 years old, a 20-year veteran of special operations. He had gray temples and calm eyes that had seen death many times. On the night of his capture, he was leading a raid on a communications center when everything went wrong. An ambush was waiting for them. Someone had talked, or perhaps the enemy had simply gotten lucky. Never found out which. A thermal round tore through his left leg, cutting the main artery. Blood poured onto the ground faster than he could stop it. His team tried to carry him, but they were closing in from all sides. Leave me, ordered. His voice was steady despite the pain. Complete the mission, I will buy you time. Sir, we cannot just. That is an order, go now. His team disappeared into the darkness, pulled himself behind a broken wall and drew his pistol. He had 24 rounds and approximately 3 minutes before he bled to death. He killed 11 warriors before the darkness took him. The 12th found him unconscious, his hand still wrapped around a dead man's trigger, connected to 4 kilograms of explosive. One twitch of his finger and everything within 50 meters would have been vaporized. They disarmed the device carefully, almost respectfully. Then they carried to their primary detention facility. Admiral came to conduct the interrogation personally. He had never spoken with a human special forces operator before. He wanted to understand what made them different. The human was strapped to a metal table in a white room. Medical machines kept him alive despite his injuries. His leg was wrapped in bandages that were already turning red. "You are the special soldiers," said. "The ones who fight from shadows, the ones who appear from nowhere." Said nothing. His face was pale from blood loss, but his eyes were clear and focused. "We have studied your kind. You are trained differently from regular soldiers. You operate in small groups. You use unconventional methods." Leaned closer. "You have caused significant damage to our occupation. I want to know how." Remained silent. "Your resistance is impressive but futile. We have captured you. We will learn your secrets, your techniques, your weaknesses. Then we will destroy your networks one by one." For a long moment, neither of them moved, then laughed. It was a wet, painful sound through broken ribs, but it was genuine. "You think I am special," he said. "I am just a warrant officer, middle of my career, average performance reviews. I was never even selected for the Tier 1 unit." Tilted his head. "Explain." "The Tier 1 operators are the best of the best. The ones who pass selection that 98% of candidates fail. The ones who train for missions that officially do not exist." Smiled through bloody teeth. "I am not one of them. I am just a regular special operations soldier. Good, but not great." "You lie. We have seen what your kind can accomplish." "That is exactly my point." Eyes met compound gaze without flinching. "Everything my team did, the raids, the sabotage, the assassinations, that was just standard work. Nothing fancy. The things you should really be afraid of, you will never see them coming. You will never know their names. You will just wake up one day and realize your entire command structure has been taken apart from the inside." Felt something he had not experienced in many years. It took him a moment to recognize the emotion. It was doubt. "We have a saying," continued. His voice was getting weaker as blood continued to seep through his bandages. "The tiger does not announce its presence. You have been hunting dogs, Admiral. The tigers are still out there, and they have been watching you for a very long time." Ordered enhanced interrogation. His specialists worked on for 3 days, using every technique they knew. The human died without revealing anything useful. His last words were a quiet song in his native language, something about mountains and morning mist. The Admiral stood over the body and felt that strange doubt growing inside him. The human had not seemed afraid at the end. He had seemed almost peaceful, as if he knew something that did not. 3 days later, the Supreme Commander of the Dominion was assassinated. It happened in his private quarters on the 47 light-years from the nearest human settlement, the most heavily guarded location in the entire Dominion. Surrounded by elite warriors, protected by security systems that could detect a single dust particle out of place. No one saw the killer arrive. No one saw them leave. The guards outside the door heard nothing unusual. The sensors recorded nothing abnormal. They found the Supreme Commander in his sleeping chamber, dead from a single wound to the center of his chest. His personal guard was also dead, arranged in a neat row against the wall. The only evidence was a small card placed on the body. It was printed with 2 Korean characters in simple black ink. "Tiger." The news spread through the Dominion like a plague. Their Supreme Commander, the leader who had conquered 17 star systems, killed in his own home by an enemy who should not have been able to reach him. If the humans could strike there, they could strike anywhere. Admiral received the news in his command chamber. He read the report 3 times, then sat in silence for a long time. The human's words echoed in his mind. "The tiger does not announce its presence. You have been hunting dogs." For the first time in his long career, understood what it felt like to be prey. On New, the resistance fighters heard about the assassination through hidden radio channels. They did not know who had done it. They did not know how it was possible. But they knew what it meant. They were not invincible. They could be reached anywhere. They could be made to fear. In his mountain cave, Master Sergeant Lee smiled when he heard the news. He did not know the operators who had carried out the mission. He probably never would. That was how the Tier 1 units worked. But he knew the message they were sending, not just but to every human still fighting. "We are coming, hold on. The tigers are awake." The assassination of the Supreme Commander broke something inside the Dominion. For the first time in their history, they understood what it meant to be hunted. Emergency meetings of the Dominion Council turned into chaos. Admirals accused each other of failure. Security chiefs blamed intelligence officers. Everyone searched for enemies that could not be found. They tripled their security protocols, then they tripled them again. Elite guards patrolled every corridor. Sensors scanned every shadow. Food was tested for poison. Water was checked for contamination. It did not help. A week after the Supreme Commander's death, 2 Dominion admirals were killed on different worlds. Same method, same calling card, 2 characters in black ink. Tiger. On Nu, the resistance grew bolder with each passing day. Master Sergeant Lee had spent 8 months training fighters in mountain caves and hidden valleys. What started as 8 operators had become 800. Farmers learned to shoot. Teachers learned to make explosives. Children learned to carry messages through enemy checkpoints. Captain emerged from the wilderness with an army. 3,000 soldiers followed her down from the mountains. They were not professional warriors. They were survivors who had lost their homes, their families, their old lives. They had nothing left except the burning need to take back their world. Today we stop hiding, told them before the first assault. Today we stop running. They came to our home and thought we would accept chains. They were wrong. The liberation of Nu began on a cold morning in autumn. It did not look like the battles in military textbooks. There were no great armies clashing on open fields. Instead, there were 1,000 small attacks happening all at once. Power stations exploded across 3 continents. Water treatment plants shut down without warning. Communication networks went silent. Supply depots burned. The occupation force, reinforced to 15,000 warriors after months of losses, suddenly found itself blind, deaf, and starving. Sergeant led a team that captured the main spaceport without firing a shot. They walked in through service tunnels that they did not know existed, disabled the security systems, and locked every door from the inside. The garrison surrendered when they realized they had no way to call for help. Corporal destroyed the orbital defense platform with a bomb he had spent 3 months building. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface, a new star that burned for 7 seconds before fading into darkness. Private O coordinated everything from a basement in the ruined capital city. Her radio connected hundreds of resistance cells, turning chaos into strategy, turning anger into action. They fought back with desperate fury. They still had superior weapons, superior armor, superior training. In straight combat, they could defeat any human force. But there was no straight combat. There were only ambushes and traps, poison and sabotage, enemies who struck from everywhere and nowhere. Officers died in their beds. Patrols walked into minefields. Bases discovered that their own weapons had been disabled days ago by infiltrators they never detected. 11 days after the liberation began, the last commander on Nu requested permission to evacuate. Admiral received the request on his flagship, orbiting high above the planet. He stood on the command deck and watched the world below. He still had enough firepower to burn every city, every forest, every living thing on the surface. But he knew what would happen if he gave that order. The humans had killed the Supreme Commander in his own bedroom. They had assassinated admirals across the Dominion. They had proven that No was safe anywhere, ever. If destroyed Nu, the Tigers would come for him. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. They would find him no matter where he hid, and they would kill him in a way that sent a message to everyone watching. He thought about the human on the interrogation table, the one who had laughed at him with his dying breath. "You have been hunting dogs, Admiral. The Tigers are still out there." "Open a communication channel," ordered. Captain's face appeared on the... She was standing in the ruins of what had once been a government building, surrounded by fighters who looked like they had not slept in days. There was blood on her uniform and ash in her hair. But her eyes were burning with something that had never seen in any conquered species. "Victory! This is Admiral of the Dominion. I am authorized to negotiate terms of withdrawal." Shook her head slowly. "No, Admiral, we are not negotiating your withdrawal. We are negotiating your surrender." "Surrender," for a moment almost laughed. "I have orbital superiority. I could destroy your world." "You could," agreed. And then you would spend the rest of your lives looking over your shoulders. Your leaders would die in their beds. Your supply lines would burn. Your colonies would rebel because they would know that the mighty Dominion can be hurt, that you can bleed, that you can be afraid. She stepped closer to the camera. You came to Earth expecting to find another conquered species. Instead, you found us, and now you understand something your calculations never predicted. Her voice was quiet but carried absolute certainty. Humans do not fight to win. We fight because we refuse to lose. There is a difference. Was silent for a long time. What are your terms? The Treaty of New was signed 3 days later. The Dominion agreed to withdraw from all human space and pay compensation for the damage they had caused. They recognized humanity as a sovereign power with full rights in the galactic community. In exchange, the humans agreed to stop hunting leaders. It was not a fair deal, but they had lost the ability to negotiate. 10 years later, humanity had rebuilt and expanded beyond anything the old generation could have imagined. New became a symbol of resistance, a reminder that ordinary people could defeat extraordinary enemies. General Park commanded the United Earth Defense Force, the first military organization that united all of humanity under one banner. Ambassador represented humanity on the Galactic Council, where her reputation for combining diplomatic skill with implied threats made her surprisingly effective. Master Sergeant Lee officially retired to a small farm on New. Unofficially, he continued training the next generation of Special Forces operators, making sure humanity would never be caught unprepared again. And in the intelligence archives of every spacefaring civilization, a new classification was added to their assessment of human military capabilities. Warning: human special forces units operate outside conventional military doctrine. Do not engage. Do not provoke. Do not assume numerical or technological superiority guarantees victory. Threat level absolute. If you encounter human special forces operators, immediate withdrawal is recommended. If withdrawal is not possible, we suggest you make peace with whatever gods you believe in. It will not save you, but it might bring you comfort at the end.